the passing earlier today, a couple hours ago, of pro wrestling legend Terry Bollea, better known, of course, to you and yours as Hulk Hogan, passing away today due to cardiac arrest at the young age of 71. And it's just, just as an aside, when you're young, and I guess like some people would say, like, I'm still young at 42, but when I was younger, I felt like 71, man, you're freaking ancient. Like you're in the dirt, man, if you're 71. And as you get older, you realize like 71's young. Like you should not be dying at the age of 71. Like you are gone too soon at the age of 71. Now that I'm sure there are people listening and watching live or perhaps after the fact in podcast form that would say, well, it's not too soon for this particular guy because a lot of people did not like Hulk Hogan. And to be fair, there are lots of reasons for people objectively to not like Hulk Hogan. Credible, substantiated claims of racism that he copped to. And he's been basically getting booed at every WWE event since then, whenever he's come back. This is not a political show, and I'm not going to give a political opinion here, but, he spoke in favor of now President Donald Trump at the Republican National Convention last year. And there are some people listening and watching that will love that, but there are some people listening and watching that will hate that, and it is their right to do so. Some really awful things in his family, and I am not trying to pile on a man who just lost his life. That's not the point of this. The point is to provide context, right? A lot of people did not like him. A lot of people really did not like him and are kind of celebrating the fact that he died. I'm not going to do that here. I offer that to now offer this. I didn't know him. I'm not going to make comments about stuff I don't know about. The stuff that has been reported is obviously awful and terrible, and nothing more needs to be said about it because it's all really obvious. But what I will say, and I'll speak for a lot of people of a certain age, and you don't have to be around my age, but it helps to probably be around my age. I was born in 1983, WrestleMania 1, 1984. I literally, not figuratively, literally grew up with Hulk Hogan, like a lot of other people did. I am 42 years old. I am a lifelong fan of professional wrestling. Now, I don't watch every show every week the way that I used to, but I know what's happening every week in WWE. I know what's happening in AEW. I even pay a little bit of attention to New Japan Pro Wrestling. Like, I'm a wrestling fan. I don't have the time, again, to invest in it that I used to, but I love pro wrestling. And it has been a pretty big part of my life. It's been one of my favorite things my entire life. I've traveled to multiple WrestleManias. I've watched countless hours of WWE and other professional wrestling throughout my life. And it is fair to say and accurate to say that without Hulk Hogan, none of this may be a reality. If Hulk Hogan is not Hulk Hogan and isn't the first ever crossover star and isn't the biggest star in the history of professional wrestling, which he was and remains to this day, and some people will argue Stone Cold Steve Austin, and he's obviously a really great choice as well. Hogan, without him, none of this exists. Vince McMahon doesn't exist, and obviously people have their opinions on him, right, wrong, or indifferent. WrestleMania doesn't become what it is. WWE doesn't become what it is. And pro wrestling does not become what it is. And a lot of people, whether you like or don't like professional wrestling, a lot of people would not have something in their lives that they really love. One of the greatest performers of all time. One of the greatest baby faces of all time. Say your prayers. Take your vitamins. This is not just a catchphrase. This is something that a lot of kids, I grew up with Hogan. A lot of kids felt that way and took vitamins and said prayers because of the Hulkster. That's just a fact. Charisma off the charts. Don't believe me? Go on Peacock, where we'll be later in the show today, and go back and watch Hogan in these early WrestleManias. Forget about the early ones. We'll get some of the later ones in a second. The crowd reactions that he would receive would dwarf the reaction of anybody else that came out. He was the biggest star by far, and he put on his massive back and the legendary 24-inch pythons professional wrestling as one of the greatest baby faces ever. Now think about this. In addition to that, how many times in life do you have someone, and you could even put this in terms, and I'm not a big movie guy, I don't have the answer to this question, or even like in music, where you have an actor who is equally adept at playing the dastardly villain as he is playing, you know, the super nice good guy, or the musician that is equally adept at guitar as he or she is at singing, for example. Being able to master both sides, both roles potentially. Master them. Not be great at one, good at the other, master of one, okay at the other. Legendary at both. Hulk Hogan is not only one of the great baby faces of all time, he is also one of the greatest heels, bad guys of all time. And his heel turn in 1996 at Bash at the Beach, turning heel and starting the NWO with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, is still, to this day, in 2025, the gold standard of heels and shocks in an industry that is designed to shock. Even just go back a few months ago, in this year, 2025, John Cena turns heel in February. It's been the most hotly anticipated heel turn since Hulk Hogan turned in 1996. And it fell flat. And you might say, on its own merit, that it was pretty good. But when you compare it to 96, it's not even close. And that is an objective, that is not my subjective opinion. That is objective. One is way better than the other. And one, I believe, will always be the gold standard in professional wrestling. So one of the great baby faces and one of the great heels. One of the greatest on the mic of all time, both as a baby face and a heel. And while there are some that will say, well, Hulk couldn't work meaning he couldn't wrestle. His matches weren't great. It's true that we now live in an era where, let's take Roman Reigns, for instance, right? It was like you could say he's like the Hulk Hogan of present day. He's 500 times the wrestler that Hogan was. Hogan did like 4 moves. It was very formulaic. It was a different time. And I'm not defending. He was not a great wrestler. He was not even close to being great. Like the most average wrestler today is a better wrestler than Hulk Hogan was when he was main eventing and selling out WrestleManias. So it's true. He might not have been the greatest wrestler ever. But he still participated in some of the most legendary matches objectively of all time. WrestleMania 1 tag team main event. WrestleMania 3, body slamming Andre the Giant in front of 95,000 at the Pontiac Silverdome, a legendary moment. Beating Randy Savage in the main event of WrestleMania 5. Passing the torch to the Ultimate Warrior in Toronto, champion versus champion at WrestleMania 6, an objectively good match. His match against Vince McMahon when he returned to WWE, which is one of the most hilarious matches of all time if you go back and watch it. It is a spectacle in the best possible way. And also, what is arguably, I would actually say it's inarguably, the greatest match in the history of professional wrestling, WrestleMania 18 in Toronto against The Rock, where Hogan enters that match as the heel, Rock is the face, and the Toronto crowd says, we grew up watching WWF at the time. We don't want to boo Hulk Hogan. We don't care about The Rock. The crowd cheered so hard for Hulk Hogan at the start of that match that Hogan and Rock both knew in that moment and were able to communicate without words that they needed to flip it and Hogan be the babyface and Rock be the heel. And people will poo-poo this and say wrestling's stupid and wrestling's fake and it's dumb and why do you like this? This is one of the great social experiments of all time. And watching two people work a crowd, work people that know it's predetermined, like me, where you lose kind of that your disbelief is suspended for a minute. And in that moment, it is real to you. In that moment, it's a real sporting event, and you don't know what's going to happen, and you're invested. And in those moments, professional wrestling becomes Shakespeare. And in that moment, pro wrestling was Shakespeare. And Hulk Hogan and The Rock were Shakespeare. It's the greatest pro wrestling match ever. And all your favorite wrestlers, from Cody Rhodes on, will all say it, that that's the greatest wrestling match ever. And Hulk Hogan, whether you like him or hate him, and I'm not here to tell you whether you should like him or hate him, if you hate him, I'm not going to judge you. I understand. The greatest professional wrestler ever, dead today at the age of 71. Thank you for all the contributions. Rest in peace. And some would probably say rest in something different, which is one of things that Femi says that I always really laugh at. And just wanted to, there you go. You bet on this Thursday. Femi, I don't know. You're not a big wrestling fan, so I don't know if you have anything on Hulk Hogan, or we can just get to the 8 buckets.
No, I will say this because, like, I didn't grow up with Hulk Hogan like how you did. Like, it was more on the tail end, like the NWO and everything like that when I got into wrestling. Like, I was more of, like, the WWF, like, Attitude Era, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock. But, like, as you said perfectly, like, that doesn't exist if not for what Hulk Hogan did. But I will say this, like, earlier this year, I think it was after night 1 of WrestleMania, I was watching it with my wife, and I was, like, kind of telling her a little bit about, like, some, like, the wrestling history and stuff. And I actually showed her the Bash at the Beach Outsiders tag team match or whatever, like kind of like give her like the story of like, hey, Hulk Hogan, and like this is like one of the great heel turns you'll ever see. And like my wife could not care less about wrestling. Course. And like she was actually captivated by it because like it was so good, and like the fans and everybody getting so angry at the heel turn and throwing stuff in the ring. And as you mentioned, like people might say it's wrestling, it's fake or whatever, but wrestling, it makes you feel just like how the TV show you might love, it makes you feel. Like wrestling makes you feel like not in the same way that sports does, because that's real action, that's like live sports and stuff, but like it makes you feel like any other entertainment vehicle. So like that's why people are so into this stuff, and like he is an icon in pro wrestling. And as you mentioned, like there's obviously the other stuff that we don't have to get into because it's pretty obvious, but like like Hulk Hogan, none of what we loved or none of what I loved growing up is possible without what he did early on in WWF and then going into the WCW and coming back to WWE towards the end of it.